I used to think that growing old meant becoming invisible. But nothing prepares you for the moment when your own family confirms it out loud. It was Christmas Eve. The house was filled with laughter, candles flickering, and the smell of cinnamon ham. My son, Brian, and his wife Amanda had invited me over for dinner. I wore my best sweater, brushed my hair back into a neat bun, even added a touch of lipstick. I wanted to look presentable. I wanted to feel like I belonged, but somewhere between the mashed potatoes and the cranberry sauce. Amanda looked straight at me and said something I'll never forget. She didn't even lower her voice. Her words, cutting, sharp, hung heavy in the air. She called me a disgrace. She said I embarrassed the family because of my looks, because I looked old. I froze. For a moment, I waited for Brian to say something. Anything. But he just sat there, eyes down, like he agreed. My chest tightened. I could hear my heartbeat over the Christmas music. And in that second, I felt it, that familiar ache I'd carried for years. The years I raised him alone after his father died. The sacrifices. The quiet holidays. The way I held it all together while they built their lives. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I simply placed my fork down, stood up, and began to walk away. Not out of weakness, but clarity. And just then, Brian's phone rang. Loud, awkward. He glanced at it and went pale. Amanda leaned over to look. For a second, they both stared, dumbfounded. Then Brian blurted out, "She's on the cover of Forbes." I didn't turn back, but I heard it, every word. You're probably wondering how an old woman, shamed at her own family's dinner table, ended up on the front page of Forbes magazine. Well, let me take you back, to the very beginning. Before the headlines, before the betrayal, before the phone call that changed everything. Let me tell you my story. Brian used to be my whole world. I remember the nights I stayed up rocking him to sleep, whispering lullabies even when my voice was hoarse. The mornings I packed his lunch with little notes inside, hoping he'd feel loved even during his hardest days. After his father passed, it was just the two of us. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that was enough. When he got into college, I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I was proud. Every extra shift I'd worked, every dinner I skipped, it all led to that moment. My son, the first in our family to wear a cap and gown. When he met Amanda, I wanted to love her. She was sharp, confident, polished. I thought maybe she'd be good for him. And at first, she was kind. She asked about my recipes, invited me to brunch. I let myself hope. But slowly, things changed. Calls became fewer, invitations stopped coming. I'd hear about family milestones from neighbors or social media. When I asked Brian, he'd say they were just busy. I told myself it was normal. People grow up. Lives shift. Then came the favor. Amanda said adding her as an authorized user on my credit card would help them buy better supplies for my grandson's preschool. That it would build her credit. That it was for the family. I agreed. Of course I did. For my grandson. I said, what followed was silence. Charges I didn't recognize. Expensive dinners, boutiques, spa visits. I confronted Brian gently, not accusing, but his eyes. They didn't even hold guilt, just distance. That's when I realized I wasn't part of their family anymore. I was tolerated, kept at arm's length, a relic. The hardest part wasn't the money. It was the shift I couldn't stop. The slow fade from mom to her. From someone who mattered to someone in the way. I used to look forward to birthdays, holidays, even just a quick call on a Tuesday. Now, I sat by the window, wondering if I'd hear from them at all. And yet, something in me refused to disappear. Even as they pushed me out, a quiet voice inside whispered, "You're not done yet." Funny how life waits until you're crumbling to hand you the most unexpected cards. Because not long after that, everything changed with just one phone call. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't need to. Silence has its own power. As I stepped out into the cold night air, my hands trembled, but not from the winter chill. I didn't look back. Not when Amanda's words still rang in my ears. Not when Brian sat there, watching, saying nothing. The car felt colder than outside. I gripped the steering wheel, steadying my breath. Years of sacrifice, erased with one insult. Then, just as I turned the key through the living room window, I saw Brian's phone light up. He answered it, and I couldn't hear the words, but I saw his face change. First confusion, then disbelief, then something I hadn't seen in a long time, shock. He stepped outside, phone still to his ear, eyes searching for me, but I was already pulling out of the driveway. He didn't know it yet, but his company had just received a media alert. His mother me was on the cover of Forbes. How did that happen? Honestly, I'm still asking myself the same thing. A few weeks ago, little Sophie from next door knocked on my door while I was baking. She said her mom had to work late and asked if she could stay a while. I welcomed her in, handed her an apron, and let her help roll the dough. She asked if she could record me for her TikTok. I laughed and said, "Only if you don't film my messy kitchen." That video, 12 million views. It turns out, people miss the sound of wooden rolling pins, old recipes passed down by memory, and a woman who said things like, "Always use real butter." Suddenly, my inbox exploded. A food blogger reached out, then a local paper, then a feature request from a national magazine, and then Forbes. They called me the grandmother of authenticity. I just called it my Tuesday afternoon. But that night, as I sat in my car outside my son's house, I realized something. All this time, I'd been told I was outdated, irrelevant, too soft for this fast world. Yet the world seemed to be craving exactly what I had to give. It's funny, isn't it? One batch of cookies, one quiet act of kindness, and everything changed. And that was just the beginning. Because what came next? It wasn't just attention. It was a calling. A chance to turn this unexpected spark into something far bigger than I ever imagined. I didn't expect the Forbes interview to feel like therapy. The journalist asked something simple. What did I think made the video go viral? I paused. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't just about cookies. It was about something people had lost: the warmth of home, the slowness of tradition, the comfort of hands that had done the same motion for decades. That night, as I replayed the interview in my head, an idea took root. Maybe my years of homemaking weren't outdated, they were desperately needed. And maybe I wasn't done giving yet. The next morning, I called Natalie. We hadn't spoken in years, but she picked up on the first ring. She was once a tech executive, brilliant, sharp, always ahead of the curve. I told her I had a crazy idea. She said, "Good. Those are my favorite kind." Together, we began to build Golden Hearth Network, an online space where women like me could teach younger generations how to sew on a button, bake real bread, write thank you notes that didn't involve emojis. At first, I had no idea what I was doing. Zoom felt like learning to drive a spaceship. I accidentally hosted a meeting from my laundry room once still had a sock on my shoulder. The Gen Z intern we hired tried to be polite, but I saw her mute button twitch more than once. But slowly, it came together. We recruited mentors, retired teachers, former chefs, even a ballet instructor from Oregon. Women who thought their skills had expired, now lighting up in front of a camera. Our first-class basic knife skills with Grandma Eileen. We had 80 live attendees and over 3,000 replays within a week. I cried watching the comments roll in, things like, "I wish my grandma was still here," or "This feels like home." And for the first time in years, I felt powerful. Not in the loud, flashy way, but in the rooted, steady way, like oak trees and cast iron skillets. I had been invisible for so long. Now, my phone buzzed daily with interview requests, partnership offers, and thank you letters from young adults who learned how to host their first real dinner. I wasn't just making content. I was building a legacy. But as the spotlight grew, so did the shadows. Because while I was pouring my heart into this mission, someone else was watching, closely and quietly, and soon they'd make their move. It started with a message from Natalie. She'd sent me a link, followed by just 2 words. "Seen this curious?" I clicked. It was a sleek new startup, clean branding, techie name, big promises. They called it Home Soul Collective. The headline read, "Bridging Generations Through Timeless Life Skills." My stomach sank. Scrolling through the site, I felt the air leave the room. Their pitch identical. The mentors, same model. Their features, workshops on mending clothes, baking, budgeting, all things I'd spent months building with Golden Hearth. But flashier, younger. They even had a fancy app. Then I saw the team page. My son's face. Right there, Chief Strategy Officer. I didn't move for a while. Just stared at the screen. At first, I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence. Maybe someone else came up with a similar idea. Maybe he was just advising them, unaware of the overlap. But deep down, I knew. He'd been watching, listening, smiling politely at my updates, asking questions that seemed like curiosity, but now I saw them for what they were: research. He took everything. Every lesson I'd learned the hard way. Every community member I'd carefully mentored. And he'd turned it into a product. A business. Something he and his wife could pitch to investors. And they never even mentioned me. Not once. I wasn't angry. Not right away. I was numb. Then came the ache, the slow, spreading kind that settles deep in your chest and makes it hard to breathe. It wasn't about the idea or the money. I've lived long enough to know ideas come and go. But this was betrayal. From the one person I'd raised with all the love I had. From the little boy I'd held through fevers, stood beside at school concerts, taught to tie his shoes. He hadn't just stolen a business model. He'd broken something sacred. I sat at my kitchen table that night, hands wrapped around a cold cup of tea, and I cried. Not the loud, dramatic kind. The quiet kind that creeps up when your heart realizes it's been cut open by someone you trusted the most. And as the tears dried, a strange calm settled over me. I knew now what I was facing. This wasn't just a business challenge. It was a battle for my name, my story, my worth. And if they thought I'd back down quietly, they were about to be very surprised. I let myself grieve. For a few days, I moved like a shadow through my own home. I didn't cook, didn't answer emails. I just existed. I allowed the pain to sit with me, like an old friend who had overstayed its welcome. But one morning, as the sun poured through my kitchen window, something shifted. I looked at my apron hanging by the door, the same one I'd worn in that first viral video. The fabric still smelled like cinnamon and vanilla. And just like that, I stood up. I wasn't going to fight them in court. I wasn't going to beg for credit, or make public statements, or play their game. I was going to do what I did best quietly, consistently, and with heart. I called Natalie. Together. We redesigned the Golden Hearth brand. Warmer colors, real photos of real women smiling, laughing, stirring pots of stew. We added new classes: sewing, budgeting, letter writing, even how to patch a leaky sink. We opened it up to mentors from all walks of life, not just grandmothers. We didn't chase the algorithm. We chased connection. Then, one night, I decided to film a short video. No makeup, no script, just me in my kitchen, holding a cup of tea. I told the story not of betrayal, but of rebuilding, of finding purpose when you feel forgotten, of choosing love, again and again, even when your heart is broken. Sophie helped me upload it to YouTube, and something extraordinary happened. The video exploded. Millions watched. Comments flooded in from young women saying they wished they had someone like me growing up. From older women saying they finally felt seen. People started tagging it with a phrase I hadn't used myself. The internet's grandma. I smiled at that. I started getting invitations, podcasts, community centers, even colleges. One day, I stood in front of a room full of strangers, sharing what I'd learned not just about cooking or mending, but about resilience, forgiveness, and the quiet power of showing up. At one of those talks, I saw him, my son. He was standing at the very back of the room, half hidden by the doorframe. He didn't say a word, but I saw the glisten in his eyes. I saw him wipe a tear away before slipping out as quietly as he'd come. I didn't chase after him. I didn't need to, because in that moment, I knew I had won something bigger than a business. I had found myself again, and just maybe, he had, too. Looking back now, I see a path I never imagined walking. There were moments when I felt discarded, moments when I questioned if my best years were long behind me. I lost my place at the family table, and for a while, I lost my sense of worth. But what I found was something far greater. I discovered that resilience doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it whispers in the quiet moments when you stand up after heartbreak, when you choose to believe in your voice again, when you give love, even when it wasn't returned the way you hoped. I didn't set out to build a movement. I just wanted to bake, to share, to feel seen. And in doing that with flour on my hands and a shaky camera on the counter, I found my second beginning. I also learned that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's strength in its softest form. My heart still aches for the son I raised, but I no longer carry the weight of anger. I've made space for understanding. And that, too, is part of healing. So if you're watching this, if you've been left out, let down, or are trying to rebuild after everything crumbled, I hope my story reminds you that it's never too late. Not to start over. Not to be seen. Not to become the person you were always meant to be. And if this touched something in you, if it made you feel less alone, please share it with someone who needs it, with someone who's still in the middle of their storm. Because sometimes, the smallest story can light the way for someone else's beginning.